Imagine being 10 years old and having the courage to stand up against the Croatian Nazis, and then survive one of the worst concentration camps in history, Jasenovac.
You're about to meet Alex Pollack, who's also the founding visionary of the Texas Holocaust Garden of Hope at Kings Harbor in Kingwood. We'll be right back.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover.
Alex Pollack, welcome to The Crossover.
Thank you.
Glad to have you on. Alex, everyone has ups and downs in lives. Yours were a lot more extreme. Let's start with, just give us a little bit about your story, where you were born and early childhood prior to the Holocaust.
I was born in Bosnia, which is part of Croatia, in a mobile oil refinery where my father was a chief chemist in 1933. And we had a normal life. We had an apartment within the refinery, and I had a happy childhood. I went to school. I started my life by speaking German, because my parents studied in Germany, and not Germany, but in Austria. I went to school, and then suddenly in 1941, the things changed drastically.
How old were you then, 1941?
1941, I was 8 years old.
And what happened?
And then suddenly the Nazis, Croatian Nazis came and took my father away from the refinery. My mother and my sister were hidden and taken care of by a lady from Austria, Denise Joris, who was our neighbor. And quite frankly, the important thing about it was, despite we had quite a few neighbors, only one, Mrs. Joris, and her husband, took care of us by changing our name and finding us an apartment outside the refinery.
So your mother, your sister,
and me
you were taken away.
Taken.
Dad was taken away. So, okay. Did you think you were going to see him the next day? I mean, all of a sudden, in one day, he's taken away.
Well, I must tell you a very unusual occurrence. My life really was also guided by the signs, very unusual signs. I had a dog, a black dog, and I saw the dog walking away from me. And then I realized at that time, at the age of 7 or 8, that my life is going to change. And I suddenly realized, and that was a guideline through my life, the signs. Now, the interesting thing about my father was that he was one of the first prisoners taken to Jasenovac. And as I said, my family, my mother and me and my sister were taken care of by Mrs. Joris.
So Dad was taken away. When that happened, your neighbor immediately helped you?
Only one neighbor
Right.
out of 20.
Okay. So the presence of the Croatians was already there, but now this was a new event.
Exactly.
Taking people.
The problem with that event was, even though I was a child, having a very normal, very happy life, is that nobody suspected the sudden occurrence of the events within days, hours.
Was there a particular moment that created that change that you remember?
Yes. The moment they took my father away, suddenly.
Okay, but I mean in the country, in the city in that time. What made them
No, just exactly. It's the fact that we were evicted from our home, or just with a suitcase, and our gratitude to Mrs. Yoris who saved our lives.
So you were a normal child playing with a bunch of boys, and as I'm assuming
Yes.
typical kid. So when you played with these children, did they? Were they Jewish and also non-Jewish?
No, they were not Jewish.
And did it really matter that you were Jewish?
No,
To a kid?
no,
You just played.
yes.
Did it change dramatically then afterwards, the way children?
Well, the interesting thing is
Interact.
that I never had a childhood after that. I was on the run, I was in a concentration camp, I didn't go to school.
So you were living now outside the city. Explain to us
Yes.
what that life was like there now.
Well, we had a small apartment, and then we changed our name, and our residence around the refinery was a danger. So Mrs. Yoris helped us to go to the Adriatic coast, which was in the control of the Italians and not the Croat Nazis. But despite the fact the paper were changed and we were taken to the camp on the island of Rab in 1942, which was a camp designed for the children and women. Men, of course, went to Jasenovac, which was a death camp.
So you're saying a camp for children?
And women, yeah, that's where I was, under the Italian rule.
Okay, and what was life like in that camp?
Interestingly enough, well, it was really the old barracks from I think a army Italian camp. Was reasonably well constructed. The amount of food and health conditions were marginal, to the extent that in 1943, when the Allies conquered Italy and Italians capitulated, that I was so sick with malaria and undernourished that I was on point of dying. Other people died. I think 70% survived, 30% died in
So,
1
Alex,
year.
hold that thought right there. We're going to come back to that in a minute. We're going to take a break here. So stay tuned. We'll be back with Alex Pollack. We're going to learn more about Jasenovac and the child's concentration camp. This is The Crossover.
Wir leben in einer Zeit, in der wir uns aktiv an den Holocaust erinnern müssen.
We are living at a time when we need to actively remember the Holocaust.
Aber wenn wir nicht wissen, was der Holocaust war, der Tod von 6 Millionen Juden, die Verantwortung von Menschen, die geschwiegen haben, dann können wir nicht Verantwortung für die Zukunft nehmen.
But unless we know what the Holocaust was, the deaths of 6 million people, we will never be able to take responsibility for the future.
Wir erleben, wie der Antisemitismus in einer ungeheuren Art und Weise in Europa und auch in Amerika wieder explodiert.
And we're currently seeing a tremendous explosion of anti-Semitism in America and in Europe again.
Und ich wünsche sehr, dass dieser Park und dieses Gelände dazu dient, gemeinsam zu lernen und die Stimme zu erheben.
And I really wish that this park will serve the purpose for learning together and raising our voices together.
During World War II, I was a young child, 7 years old, and my father and family were dislocated from our home. And as that happened, my father was taken to the Jasenovac camp, which is in Croatia, on the river Sava. And I realized that after doing research with some friends, that this was a location and a duty of our people living here to remember and do something about the remembrance of over 700,000 people, of which there were 20,000 children.
Welcome back to the crossover. We're with Alex Pollack, and we're going to continue with the timeline of his story. Alex, take us from the apartment where Mrs. Denise Juris had basically rescued and protected you. Take us forward.
Well, in that time that we were at the apartment, Mrs. Juris prepared for us paper with new names. And we went by train about 200-300 miles to the coast, Adriatic coast, where we hoped that under the occupation of that part of Croatia by the Italians and not the Croatian Nazis, we will be saved. Well, that was not the case. We were taken to a camp, an island of Rab, which was just for women and children. We stayed there between 1942 to September 43. September 43, we were liberated by the Allies, and we fled on a little ship to the coast on the mainland of Croatia and joined the partisan forces because the country was still divided because the Croatian Nazis and the partisans.
And what is a partisan, Alex?
The partisans were the nationalists or people that fought for the freedom of the country, and that included the Serbs, the Croats, the Jews, the non-Jews. And they were under the command of Marshal Tito. Besides Marshal Tito's partisans, there was a fraction called Chechniks, who were dedicated to only to Serbs, but they were a small fraction. As the war proceeded and in Croatia, my mother was taken by the Nazis and she was murdered somewhere, I think in Germany. My sister was saved again by Mrs. Joris, but I was left on my own. And
did you ever see your father again after they took him?
Never. My father's history is a very interesting one. Namely, is that he was taken to Jasenovac, which had a brick factory. And my father was one of the first. And these men were making these bricks on which they put their names on the bricks before firing them.
So Alex, at 10 years old, here you are part of the partisans. Your mother is
with me.
With you, and how's she even holding up at all?
Well, she was holding up, but I could see that the situation affected her mentally, and nothing you can do about it. And some people survive Holocaust, some people give in.
So what were your eyes seeing? That
mine is an incredible situation. I don't know even today why. I just didn't believe not surviving it.
What were some of the things you saw that were just...
well, it's just a total... I divorced myself totally from the events. I just flow with the events. Probably as a child I enjoyed the adventure. And it was an adventure for the simple reason that I would go with the partisans, which went to, and I remember distinctly, they went to destroy certain railroad lines, because that was the main line that went from Greece to Germany or west, on which the Panzer Division of Marshal Rommel. With the partisans at the time, and this is where my mother was, there were Americans and English special forces who actually did the demolition, set up the explosive. And I would go with them just for the hell of it. Anyway, I didn't know what else to do. And that was quite a thing. I saw movies about it, but it's nothing like the reality. What your wife said, and it's true, I remember it, when we came back and went to another mission, there were small villages all over Bosnia and that area were small villages that have been there for hundreds of years, maybe with 100 people, children, wives, and so on. And this is what I never forget. When we went to another mission, next day, we saw the whole village, men, women, and children, hanged by the trees, beautiful trees. And I'll remember that. That was their revenge. And that was not only inhuman, it was beyond being inhuman.
So Alex, we cannot even imagine what your eyes have seen. Incomprehensible that 100 people are just hung on trees and you're a 10-year-old witnessing this. We'll return in a few minutes with the crossover and hear the rest of Alex's story.
For nearly 2,000 years, Jews and Christians have been divided. But now, God is calling for the healing of past hurts and the comforting of His people. Discover how God is prophetically uniting Jews and Christians across the world today on The Crossover. The Crossover exists to communicate to the Jewish community that there is a growing group of Christians who love them unconditionally. The focus of the Crossover program is to promote a greater understanding of the differences and similarities between Jewish and Christian customs, history, and theology, while encouraging a closer walk with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As a second-generation Holocaust survivor, Rosalie's Jewish heritage includes parents who were protected from the Nazis by Christians. Yet for more than a decade, Mitch and Rosalie searched for meaning in life in the New Age movement. But after returning to their Judeo-Christian roots, they discovered God's purpose for their lives: to rebuild bridges between Christians and Jews. Now through TV, radio, the internet, speaking engagements, the healing room, and print and video resources, they are reuniting Jews and Christians in fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Join Mitch and Rosalie as they tackle tough topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover. The Promised Land.
And I also tried to make it very clear to the Christians all over the world that they are threatened to the same extent as the Jews and Israel are threatened. And I also say basically that Jews and Christians are waiting for the Messiah, who is a Jew from Israel who speaks Hebrew. And that Messiah is going to come to Jerusalem. And so Christians share this faith with the Jews.
The Hebraic roots of Christianity.
And we began looking at Jesus through Jewish spectacles and not our Texas spectacles or American spectacles or even Western culture spectacles. He's so much more glorious. He's so much more grand. It does not in any way detract from the fact that he's the Son of God, the risen Savior, but he's also a man.
Judaism 101.
Many times people ask, what is a Jew? Is it a race? Is it a people? Is it a culture?
Jewish-Christian relations. Bible, fact or fiction? For more information on The Crossover and The Crossover Project, contact Rosalie Jerome or log on to our website.
Welcome back to The Crossover. We're continuing with Alex Pollack. And Alex, you were sharing as a partisan, as a 10-year-old, fighting, standing against evil, some of the horrors you saw. Give us one more example.
One more example is, and it is part of my personality really is, during the war, during the Balkans, of course, and I remember this distinctly, I didn't have normal shoes. Those shoes were made out of the leather of a goat. And I was working in 1943 winter on very bad terrain with stones and so on. And I suddenly realized my shoes are giving up. I looked at my shoes and I realized that was a lesson of a lifetime. I said to myself, okay, one thing is being sick out of the island of Rab and nearly dying. Failure of my shoes will be the end of me, because there was no shoes. There was nobody to repair them. And I really concentrated, and I said to myself, those shoes have to last for at least another few days till we get to a safe situation. And that is a secret of my survival. I don't look at my surrounding only with the immediate surrounding that could endanger my life or continuing to live. And that was a lesson of lifetime. And my success as a chemical engineer.
Alex, let me go back there. How did you mentally survive?
Because I looked at my shoes and I went very delicately, like a ballet dancer, to save my shoes and my life.
Okay.
That is unusual.
So, yes, Alex, you are one of the few that were able to not only survive but fight.
Correct.
So bring us to modern times. So the world we're living in now, are we missing anything in America? Are there warning signs that are out there that are the same signs you saw back in the past when you were a partisan?
Yes. I'm very, very perturbed by these supremacists, white supremacists, the happenings that came in Texas and in Ohio. Those are the signs of a great danger. Now this is even worse for what that I was through. These people have automatic weapons. These people can have access to nuclear bombs, and will be a new Holocaust if we are not careful. Nuclear Holocaust or armed Holocaust.
So Alex, what legacy are you trying to leave as an 85-year-old right now before your time comes?
5 years ago, I was in Kingwood on King's Harbor. I sat in a restaurant and I looked over the water. That reminded me of Jasenovac. It suddenly was a sign. And I have been trying, and with your help, to get at that site and make a Holocaust park.
Alex, expand a little bit on the partisans and the liberation of the camps.
Partisans liberated the camp, Jasenovac, where 1 million inmates died, including 20,000 children, and of course my father. The horror of this camp was that whoever was capable to work in Germany in Auschwitz, they went sent to Auschwitz. At the moment of liberation of the camp, 73 inmates survived, and they broke through the wire and were killed. So when the partisans liberated Jasenovac, was only very few that survived.
Okay, I read there was 100,000 that passed through there, but they really don't have good records because it was a camp that, unlike the Nazis, that kept good records. Here, the Croatian Nazis did not.
Correct.
So, Alex, in your life, there was one person that changed the course of your life, that you were able to come to America, start all over, be successful, be an engineer, and you worked with engineers on the Manhattan Project.
Yes.
Because one person, Denise Uris, came into your life.
Yes.
So, did you ever get to see this upstander again?
Yes, I saw her once, and actually she was on the Adriatic coast, but my sister saw her several times.
And what was that time for you when you crossed paths with this lady that basically saved your life?
Well, it was a very emotional meeting, and quite frankly, in my infinite belief in the power of the good Lord, I think she's praying for me still now.
And how old were you when you got to see her again?
Well, I was about 30 years old,
Okay.
and then she died.
Okay. So, Alex, you can speak to our audience, our young people out here. You just had 80 years ago, just hell broke loose, and you were able to be a witness to that and actively engage in it. What would you say to our audience? What do they need to know to take away from all of this?
Well, to take away of it is that even through our lifetime, we have to be strong and believe in the happy ending, that life is very precious. And you have to be very careful in how you conduct yourself. Of course, I believe in God. And, you know, we all have battles, whether it is cancer, but the basic thing is to have the courage to survive. The courage.
Alex, thank you for your courage in coming on our show and sharing your heart with our audience. And thank you for being the founding visionary of the Holocaust Garden of Hope in Kingwood, Texas. Thank you.
Join Mitch and Rosalie as they reach an ever-growing worldwide audience through the crossover. We invite you to become a crossover partner right now by calling the number on your screen. For your monthly gift of $30 or more, you will receive the Crossover Partnership Pack, which includes a DVD of today's program, a personal greeting and prayer message from Mitch and Rosalie, more information about the Crossover Project. As you continue to support the Crossover each month, you will receive a new Crossover DVD, a monthly ministry report, and your name will be added to the Healing Room. Call now or log on to our website and join the growing family of Crossover Partners. And be sure to join us again next week as Mitch and Rosalie tackle timely topics and welcome dynamic guests on The Crossover.
Lord God of Abraham, Isaac and Israel, let it be known today that you are God. We offer up our lives as a living sacrifice.